Okay, so hello everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. I don't think I thought I would ever start an event with such a saying, but I believe from the registration that we actually have people from all different time zones around the world with us. I find it a real pleasure that we're able to host this event now here online. I guess this is about one of the few perks that we have from COVID, that these kind of virtual events are actually becoming normal for us to attend. Of course, it's not the same as a live event, but then again, I feel that's probably comparing the wrong things. Many of you have heard probably the quote from Oscar Wilde that comparison is the thievery of joy, and I think we should be extremely happy, and I am, to see all of you here with us today for this New Year's event of EIT Climate-KIC and our strategic programs. So my name is Niels. I'm part of the Climate-KIC team. I'm based out of Zurich, Switzerland, and I'll be moderating you through the day today. Now, I must admit that my personal reasons for being involved in the fight against climate change are quite selfish, actually. I'm originally from the Netherlands, and the town that I grew up in was already 2 meters below sea level, and that was even before the sea level started rising further. And I have two little kids. I want to be able to show them the beauty of my home turf and as well the rest of the world. And this motivation to work on the fight against climate change is also the reason why I joined ClimateKIC in the end, because I believe that ClimateKIC is one of the pivotal actors and has a really unique vision and strategy on how to actually help us combat climate change. So, what is the reason why we're hosting this event today? You can see the slides in the background. We have three main goals for this event. So, the one hand is connect. So, we will have a few presentations here and there, but then as well, we will have various networking sessions for you to be able to meet each other, to meet new people, to connect and expand your network of climate activists further. Second thing is to inspire. So we're going to share stories of change and change makers and present inspiration for how you can get involved with that. And finally, there's the action bit. So we're going to share opportunities for each one of you to get involved with the fight against climate change on your own specific way. How will we do that? We will do that with the following agenda. So in just a bit, we're gonna start with the Inspire bit. We're gonna have three presentations. So from Kirsten, the CEO of EIT Climate-KIC, from Dennis for the Rise, and then Olga, who is an alumni of our startup programs from the startup Agra Sustain. Each one is going to speak for about 5 to 10 plus minutes. And during the presentations, please use the chat function to ask questions, and we will actually then take those questions up with them at the end to ask a few of the questions. Then we're going to go to the networking session. So for those of you who have not used Hopin before, as you can see on the left side of your screen, there is the stage, there's the networking sessions, there are the breakout rooms, and I will explain that later, but that's a place where you can go and network with different people from the event here. Then after we have the connection part, we're going to go to the action part. So you're going to hear from the different programs that we have at EIT Climate Change. And quite soon afterwards, we're going to move deeper into Meet the Community, where almost each of these programs has their own breakout room that you can join and join the discussion, and also figuring out how you yourself could get involved with the fight against climate change, share your learnings from everything that you're already doing, so that we can together find better ways to fight this essential fight that's happening. And then we're going to close somewhere around 12:40. These are, by the way, all European CET times, where I'm based, where most of the ClimateKIC team is based. So for those of you with fast brains, you can probably translate that to the time zones that you're in. Now, without further ado, I'd like to hand over to our first speaker, and I hope that is actually going to work right now, that Kirsten is with us. Elisabetta, can you hand over to Kirsten? And by the way, if you hear me say the word Elisabetta, she's the wonderful organizer of this event in the background, and she has the technology. Seems to work. Hi, Kirsten.
Hello, good morning, everybody. Welcome to our New Year event on celebrating and paying attention to what we're doing with entrepreneurship programs, business development, venture creation, new solutions development. I'd like to start with a reflection on the way this year has started for me. A couple of key sort of pieces of sobering intelligence on what is about to be released with the IPCC report and where we are at in terms of the gap between where we need to be, what we're committing to, even if it's still not sufficient, and the reality of what we're on track to live with. And that's partly a sobering reflection on what happened at COP26 last year, the good and the definitely not good, and partly a sobering reflection on what's emerged in the intervening months. So I think the framing I would like to put around this introduction and this look forward in the way in which we think about working together and how to leverage our collective efforts in more and more effective ways is really, if you can go forward, Niels, is really to just take stock and remember, what are we dealing with? In 2022, climate action is an absolute critical failure point. We are out of time, we're doing too little, we are doing it too late, we're doing the wrong things, and we are relying on institutions and thinking that are part of the problem, including the way we think about markets, capital markets, venture building, investment, and so on. We are iterating on a broken system, and our challenge is how to change that system. So a lot of what Climate-KIC is really about, and trying to invest in the way in which we do innovations to change the system. Next slide, Niels, please. Now, the reason why I'm putting this up is because I think it matters for us to think about context. And just right now, with war literally mustering on Europe's borders again, we really need to think about the context in which we're building businesses. And it's not a context of stable market development. It's not a context of relying upon the way in which we attract resources and then release them out into the world and they go and do good on their own. It's a context in which we have to actively work to make a difference. And go forward, please, Niels, and to close the gap, use and leverage innovation to close the gap between what is needed and where we are, what we think is possible and what we think is necessary, and what we know is necessary, or what we begin to intuit, because part of that problem is the degree of uncertainty and unknowing in how to create a different way of living. And this is really about, it's not just about kind of coming up with new solutions and a replacement game, and I'll come back to that. It's really about a different way of living and creating and bringing that into the future and accelerating the way we bring the future forward. So that's the reason, if you could go forward, Niels, why Climate-KIC is so obsessed with systems thinking and systems transformation and the design of innovation to achieve and catalyze systemic change. It's reflecting and responding to the fact that climate change is an inherently systemic problem, that it's vast, that our problem-solving experience collectively simply goes nowhere near giving us the precedents to tackle what we're tackling, and that when we design businesses and when we design solutions, we need to design right down the bottom of this. We really need to design for how are we retraining, rethinking, recasting, and reconceiving of ourselves. So that leads me to Climate-KIC. Next slide, please, Niels, and what it is that we are doing. Climate-KIC is a European organization. It's working in 39 countries, or indeed through the entrepreneurship programs in well more. It is a means of taking effective action on climate and environmental crisis through innovation. We are an organization that is really focused on hard to abate emissions, on wicked problems and wicked challenges. And our focus, next slide, is to, oh, not that one. Yeah, thank you. And our focus is to seek to catalyze systemic change by the way in which we do innovation, the way in which we develop ventures, the way in which we think about skills and mindsets and capabilities and support transformation in ways of thinking and ways of doing, the way in which we partner with challenge owners, what we call challenge owners, cities, regions, governments, industry, value chain holders, or organizations embedded in big value chains and supply chains, industrial ecosystems. This is very much about understanding how to generate options and pathways for radical transformation, because we know that transformation is possible if we have choices and possibilities available. It becomes very difficult when we're operating from a perspective of constraint. Could you go forward, Niels, please? So we're an organization that has a track record. We've been around since the beginning of 2010. We have invested significantly because we're supported by the European Institute of Innovation and Technology. We have invested significantly and pointedly in the building of new ventures, new business models, new technologies, new solutions. And we have, as a result, incubated a significant number of climate positive startups. We have invested in innovations, technology transfer from university, industrial development, R&D, and we've finished at the beginning of last year a summative assessment of the carbon emissions avoided from those innovations, with the result that we have an annual 13 million tonnes avoided of carbon emissions only from the innovation projects. We're just now finishing a study looking at the startups and what they have in turn produced. But a lot of this has also taught us about what not to do. It's taught us about the virtue of investing in the supply of innovation to solve for climate change and to tackle climate resilience, to improve climate resilience and adaptation. But it's also taught us about the limitations of a model that is heavily invested in supply, but not paying attention to the market forming, market making, market structures, and structural changes that are needed to pull through new economics, new relationships, new infrastructure, and different ways of living. Some of that underpinning assumptions that I had in the previous slide. So what we chose to do several years ago, if you could go forward, Niels, is really focus in our efforts, thinking about complementarity, on hard to abate emissions, on societal change, on regenerative business models and supply change, the wicked problems that are holding back transformation in time. And we published a strategy that really held us to work on how do we leverage what we know about encouraging and nurturing fantastic new businesses and encouraging and nurturing new ways of thinking and working with industry. How do we turn that into a mechanism for becoming useful to those who are sitting with the challenge, the cities that need to transform almost every aspect of the way in which they exist as physical infrastructures and social ways of being and engaging and living and going to work and moving about and wanting to have fun, the industries, the farming communities, and so on. If you could go forward, Niels. So Climate-KIC is an organization that knows for solving for climate change is not a replacement game. This is about tackling a systemic challenge, the challenge of human transformation, which is really what climate change responses need to be all about, through systemic approaches to innovation to enable transformation. Please go forward. And our aim in that is to work to transform whole places and industries and value chains, working with funders and with partners to create and develop very ambitious mission-led programs. And that's some of what we're doing now. If you could go forward, Niels. So just to give you a glimpse in the broader context of where our strategic programs sit, and then I'll come to the role and purpose of our strategic programs. We use a portfolio approach. So we are explicitly working, it's why we work. We're explicitly working to acknowledge and to seek to design for radical uncertainty. If you could go forward. The uncertainty of having well lined up perfectly, and that next one more press, perfectly lined up solutions to create a completely different way of living, knowing that we actually don't know quite how to achieve that. We don't know how to kind of retrain ourselves to ask for less, to think differently about our own demand. We need to experiment and learn how to do that. And we need to learn and look for the unexpected combinations of things that help us enable that kind of transformation. This is about putting multiple solutions in play to test, to learn, to adapt, and to enable them to connect and join forces, to metamorphose, to change whole systems end to end and become something that is transformative. And that is about making markets. Could you go forward, please, Niels? So to that end, we are the transformation partner of some of the most ambitious climate cities, regions, countries, and businesses. And we are using this kind of portfolio, place-based, specifically place-based, value chain-based portfolio building and hosting and enabling and facilitating to help those cities see what multiple different possibilities look like, to test 3 or 4 different solutions on one particular aspect, to test hundreds of solutions working on waste, on water, on infrastructure, on retrofit, on heating, on cooling, on food systems, on mental and emotional resilience, greening, rewilding cities, on thinking about how to change soil, the way soil captures carbon, farming practices, hundreds of things together simultaneously and connected in ways that they can accelerate their learning from one another. And that is then, if you can go to the next slide, feeding into large-scale platforming with the European Commission, for example, in the Net Zero Cities Initiative, which is the first pilot of the first city mission to actually start, the EU mission on 100 neutral and climate neutral and smart cities by 2030. There are now a series of calls open to begin to activate the full platform of European missions. And this is really very much the same kind of logic. I understand, accept, and put the bar out really high. We know that we need to decarbonize by 2030, not 2050. And we know that we need to work out how to adapt to dramatic climate changes everywhere that's affecting farming, food, heat, infrastructure, you name it. And we need to do so much, much faster than we're doing so now. So our mission-led logic is essentially raising that bar, naming the gap between what we need and where we are now, and pulling through the market dynamics and pulling through new economics and pulling through offtakes and demand for solutions that really can add up and work with others to create this kind of change. Next slide, please, Niels. And as an organization working in that space, one of our principal objectives is to look at how do we blend in cross-cutting finance, blended finance, to enable the relationships between farmers and business developers and new solutions and entrepreneurs and governments and policymakers, to enable that kind of system of collaborative decision-making and choice-making to happen and to work, and to blend in the funding that is needed to catalyze, the funding that's needed to follow through, the type of funding that's needed to take risks on options before you know that they're investable, the type of funding that comes in to invest, the type of funding that enables and supports the orchestration of those connections, which is where Climate-KIC is really seeking to play a role. So if you could go to the next slide, please, Niels. This then brings me to the question of Climate-KIC strategic programs that we're here to celebrate, to explore, and to throw forward for this next year. The strategic programs for Climate-KIC are really about building mindset, skills, and solutions. It's about activating, educating, and accelerating possibilities so that we can take meaningful action, so that we have choices, and so that we can test those choices and we can bring them together and we can place them in the contexts that need them. It's not about just getting the choices out there. It's really about placing them into contexts where they become useful. And the next slide, please. So I'm going to give you just an overview of what I know you'll be digging into today and a couple of reflections on what matters to us in doing this work. Why does it matter to us so much to nurture and to continue to support and build up these programs as part of this landscape of our efforts to enable and catalyze systemic change and radical transformation through innovation? What really matters here is resources, hope, ultimately, by having possibilities, the hope of agency, of being able to contribute, to make a meaningful difference, as Niels was talking about before, to go home to your kids and look at them in the face and say, I am doing something about it. The agency and the skill, the combination of agency, skill, and capability to think differently, to consider possibilities that don't come natural, to start shifting some of the lock-ins and kind of limitations in our own mindsets that are stopping us finding a way from what we think is possible now, livable now, to what's actually needed, and to open up possibilities for considering things that are just completely unlooked for. And that's often about combinations, ways of putting stuff together, or ways of reconfiguring underlying assumptions together with the solutions that suddenly opens up a space for different designs for life and designs for living. So when we're supporting participants across all of these programs, and this is going from young innovators paying attention and supporting the children who are protesting on the streets and the teachers that are accompanying them, how can they take action instead of feeling that they are powerless or trapped in a generational disconnect? The students who are coming through the journey, who are dedicating a couple of months of deeply immersing themselves in how to put their hands on different ways of acting and different ways of understanding the possibility and the need for acting. The professionals who are reskilling, and in a context of green skills and sustainable skills for a sustainable future, this is becoming intensely important at all generational levels. How do we enable people to acquire new skills, to think differently about infrastructure, technology, logistics, supply chain, consumption, and so on? The big programs that reach out globally, Climathon, speaking to citizens living in cities, ClimateLaunchpad, speaking to anyone in the world who feels like they want to put their hands into making something, making a business, making an idea work, bringing it to market. And the Accelerator that helps us push that through into these demand-led market-making contexts, the portfolios in cities, in landscapes, in industry value chains, and pushing it through into that blending of finance, offtake agreements, demand finance, insurance, investment, capital, and so on. So all of these ultimately are asking our participants and working with our partners to design for and anticipate exponential market development, which has been incredibly slow. It's slow now in hard to abate emissions. This is market failure territory, but it is growing gradually, and the growing influx of public funding will help, and private funding, but also in pace with crisis awareness, thinking about how you're going to be developing a business in a slow but non-linear, potentially exponential area of market building that has to anticipate the need for alternative economics and alternative economic thinking, sufficiency, degrowth, circularity, changing demand, changing the designs for life, not just replacing. How are you going to also anticipate crisis? Because you're going to be working and dealing in businesses and markets where the world is physically changing and changing our assumptions and changing the predictability. And how do you think about speed and scale? Because if we don't work out ways of going viral, of replicating, of connecting, of accelerating active learning and adoption, we simply won't be in time. And so this is an essential part of the ingredients of what we're doing, platforming, and you'll hear a lot more about that. So really, ultimately, what we're looking for are heroes of a collaborative, collective effort to work together with others to find solutions that join up with others and that meet and understand and seek to understand and engage with the contexts in which we live, in which we do business, from which we buy, so that we can achieve structural change, holistic change, systemic change, and transformation in time. Thanks very much, Niels. That's me done.
We have two small questions that we'd like to ask you briefly before we move on to our next speaker. And the first one is actually I'm taking the moderator's privilege to ask this one. So if you're an entrepreneur and you're building your climate startup that has a potential climate impact, your focus, you have your head down and you're walking forward. And if you believe in systems transformation, but you also want to build your business, so thinking about all those concrete stuff, how can you do that? So how can you take this idea of transforming systems into your day-to-day work of actually building a startup and all the grind that is involved in that? You're muted still, Kirsten. I think that automatically happened.
It's a very good question, and of course the hardest thing possible, because you're also operating, and that's important to acknowledge, in a world that tends to focus your attention in on build the mousetrap, get the money, go to market, she'll be right. I think everything. So for that, one possibility is work with Climate-KIC, because there's a lot of the effort that we're trying to put in, but a lot of it has to do with paying attention constantly to who and what needs this. Who is it for? Who could it work with? What context can it respond to? Not just generic user needs. How could it work, and how does it interface with other pieces of this? How well do I understand the system of effects that the thing I'm building is connected to or related to or dependent upon or interdependent with. And having that in scope as the business build, as part of business building, part of design building, designing for, looking for the collaborative exchanges, the partnerships, the synergies, the adjacencies, those things matter. It basically means build a business in context. Don't just build it where the real only context is whether investment is interested in it.
So try to be a step ahead and change the narrative.
And kind of anticipate, how am I doing this in such a way that, let's say for the sake of argument, I know that there's this organization called Climate-KIC out there. This organization called Climate-KIC is signing up 100 cities to decarbonize fully by 2030. Well, what are those cities going to need? Where's my proof of concept opportunity to get myself into 1 or 3 or 100? What would it take for me to put myself on the ground with this idea and get it to work with 3 neighborhoods, 3 districts, 3 streets? Replace city for farming community and landscapes and the adaptation mission, or replace city and landscape for industrial value chains and the big industry partners. That's what we need. People thinking about how to join the dots.
Thank you. And we also have a final, very concrete question from Sarup, is regarding Climate-KIC's role or business model. Are we mainly doing consulting, or what does Climate-KIC do in transforming these systems?
So we use the word orchestration because it's a word that came through a long process of reflection on how do we name the role we play, which is broad and which is made up of many elements. So we do actively support and nurture and incubate individual organizations and individual entrepreneurs. And we actively educate individual people in different education programs. And that's a lot of the work we do in strategic programs. When we're working on what we call deep demonstrations, the systems transformation portfolios, we're applying a lot of that into market. What we are doing, I used to work in consultancy for a while at different moments in my life. It doesn't look or feel like consultancy. We don't rock up with 120 slide deck and a big price ticket and say, we'll tell you what you need to do to get it right. We get in the trenches with city governments. We spend months and weeks with them, helping to work out how do they ask for something different? How do they work out how to extract funding for it? We bring entrepreneurs in there. We bring innovation projects in there. We work with our partners to extract experience and learning from those things on the ground to make sense of, well, what are we seeing from this Metropolitan Forest project? Are we seeing that actually something is opening up in terms of a sense of need around food system security or technology limitations? Well, how do we connect that to the regulatory sandbox? Because the issue here is a regulatory block. So we are facilitating constantly the connection of usefulness, meaning making, possibility, change, investment. It's kind of being like a facilitator of the market building, proof of concept building that I was referring to earlier. It doesn't really look like consultancy, and we don't feel it to be like that. Sometimes it can be funded in that way, but often it really is part of the making of innovation into deployment and transformation.
Yeah, and I would describe it as one of those new jobs or roles that is emerging in the kind of transformation we need. So it's a future-oriented new kind of role.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, Kirsten, for sharing your insights and being with us for the beginning of the presentation. I'm sure that if people have questions, they can reach you through us or through whatever means. And with that, we're going to move on to our second Inspire bit. We're going to move over to Dennis, who I've had the privilege of listening to before in previous presentations. And Dennis, I'm very much looking forward to hear from you. And I'm going to hand over the floor to you right now.
Thanks a lot. Dennis Pamlin, I've been working the last 30 years of trying to, here is my presentation. We're trying to see how we actually turn the challenge we have in society into an opportunity. And this is a little bit of what I think I would try to fill in what Kirsten was talking about also, in terms of we are really changing the world now. If you look back the last 20, 30 years, what was climate entrepreneurship then and now is very different. You can take the next slide, just the whole slide if you want to. What we basically were doing then for the last 100 years was improving existing systems. We made better cars, we made better records, we made better phone answering machines. We had a quite static society. Then sometimes during the 1890s, things started to change. And we now have still most, and I love when Kirsten also struggle to explain the role of Climate-KIC, because Climate-KIC is creating something new and meeting these new demands. A simple answer would be, well, we're an incubator. We just help you move, to a better business model. But that just brings you in as one part in a broken system. So that is the static problem innovation. Then you try to make the car a little bit better. Then you try to make the coal power plant a little bit better. What we have now is dynamic opportunity innovation. No one is really interested in a fossil-free typewriter, but that is very much the current innovation ecosystem. We look at what we have and we try to make fossil-free versions of that. That will not work, both because the constraints on the planet, next slide, the fact that we tend to think about climate as reducing emissions, but I'm really happy to see the global audience here, because for most people around the world, and especially the 80% that in Asia and Africa that are going to be around the world in 2050, their challenge is not to reduce emissions. Their challenge is to provide flourishing lives for people without destroying the planet. So this idea of reducing emissions is very a Western perspective. We really need to look at how does a zero carbon economy that lifts people out of poverty looks like. Next slide, please. And that's where we talk about this expanded innovation agenda, and where the mental images of an entrepreneur should not look at, here's where we have current emissions, this is where I'm going to try to reduce them, and here's the existing sectors, and here's their problems. That is very much how we are organized still, and all around the world, especially Western countries. But we need to start asking, what are the human needs? How do we provide health and nutrition? How do we live flourishing lives? And who can provide those solutions in ways that allow for 11 billion people to live in harmony with nature? And that also requires you to think very much about resource efficiency and cost efficiency, because we can't make luxurious private jets that are flying a few people around the world zero carbon. That will not help the maximum amount of people to live good lives. So that is really, I'd like you to think about the difference between a static problem approach when you look at the current society, and that's sort of the old entrepreneurship thinking, and the new one that is about what are the needs of society, how do we meet them in smart ways. Next slide, please. And what is interesting is that the science really backs this up. When IPCC were looking into what happens if we look at the problems, and we ask everyone and say, who has big emissions? And then say to them, reduce your emissions. And then they say, oh, we can do this much, but then we need lots of CCS, or we need massive amounts of renewables, in ways that basically destroy the planet or put the risk of CCS never even happening. I don't know how many of you have seen the movie Don't Look Up, but you have this sort of hope that a future technology will solve everything. And I think that's a very dangerous way of thinking. But IPCC also provided another way of looking at things. Next slide, please. If we start asking ourselves what we need in society, how do we get sustainable nutrition? Instead of asking how can we make meat production slightly less bad, how do we get protein? Instead of asking how do we get huge Bill Gates size build houses to be net zero, ask how do we live flourishing lives? What is the spaces we need for creative living? And how do we grow as people? Who shapes us? Well, is it Kim Kardashian with 250 pair of shoes that is seen a successful life? Or is it a nurse, a scientist, someone who helps the world become a better place? Who shapes our ideas on where we want to be? And I think that's where Climate-KIC is really a unique position. So instead of trying to just make fossil-free typewriters and the equivalent of that, to really ask these deep questions about what is the flourishing lives that we want to live. And next slide. So that's also where you see these most mainstream ideas from, this is for Financial Times. It's very much on the supply side. The symbol of climate solutions is often solar and wind. And to some extent, that is part of the equation, but that's a really, 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 really small portion of the challenge. Not to dismiss that, most of many of my friends are in those businesses, but it's really about how we live, how we eat, how we explore things, what do we strive for. That is what we need to do. And we're still struggling. We don't really know what the symbols are for that. I sometimes ask people about, how do you think about your mental images? If I say book, how many of you are still thinking about a dead forest book? And how many are thinking about a digital book? And if I say workplace, how many think about a physical space, and how many think about a laptop or a working creativity thing? What kind of mental images do we have to guide us for innovation? Next slide. And that's where we become really concrete, because if we really look at where we are, and if we try to think ourselves as climate entrepreneurs, yes, there is a room for renewables and pushing that, and might be some room for CCS also if we fail to be smart. But it's really about, how do we create these attractive lives, the user appeal? How do we change the consumption patterns? How do we establish what is these creative lives that we want to do, instead of looking at the fixed situation today? And how do we dematerialize the economy? How much of things do we don't even need to own or to have physical versions of? You don't need a lot of CDs or physical books today. 11 billion people can read and get access to music today with those new ideas. How do we get access to information, to creative lifestyles, to outdoor living in ways that don't require us to kill the planet? Those are the fundamental questions today. And it's really about providing something that is joyful. It's not about saying we're going to stop this and do less of that. It's really providing and pushing for the next generation of exciting solutions. And the last two slides then. First, it's really about, as Kirsten also was saying, we need to come together. We can't just throw out a lot of solutions here, or we can't just sit with financial institutions and do a green version of what we have, or we can't just sit and say, public procurement, we're going to buy a better car. We need to come together and really ask, how do we really work together here? And that's where Climate-KIC is such a unique platform also, that it's really bringing together different parts of the ecosystem. That is very rarely happening. Often you get sort of stuck in one of these boxes. But it's also about how you measure things. Next slide. So how you see your roles. And this is just one example of, how do you view those around you, the incubators you work with, the investors you work with? What are they after? Do they want to claim carbon neutral, or do they want to really measure their positive impact? Are they just filtering and try to find something? How does it look like in your own ecosystem? And that's also why joining up with Climate-KIC and other sort of networks is so important, because you can find like-minded people that struggle with the same ideas. Because very often it's easy to feel crazy in this world, because we say one thing and we do something fundamentally different. And just having a network of people that you can share those experiences with is really valuable. And then the last on measurement then is, of course, it's important for you to start thinking about also, what is the impact you have, and try to quantify that. But I would urge you to be careful also to not spend too much time in asking too specific numbers, because the most exciting solutions, we often only can get an order of magnitude. It's easy to see if you switch from a fossil car to more resource efficient combustion engine. But to have a smart walkability solutions for city planning, it's much harder to assess, but it's much closer to what we need. And the last thing I want to mention is also that I think you, as a new group of entrepreneurs, we really need to ask fundamental questions about the value of shaping a better future. Because today there is this gap between the way we financially assess and get money in the bank or get markets for our solutions, that is just based on narrow sets of costs that excludes all these different things. We're starting to see good positive signs that companies like Tesla, for instance, are higher valued than old fossil cars, because they understand now, investors, that the way they relate to customers, the way they're open for new ideas and integrated solutions really help them to do that. So to answering also the question about how do you become part of the ecosystem, it's really about thinking about your feedback mechanisms. If you sell something, who else can sell more things? Who do you encourage to the kind of consumption, the underlying infrastructure. What underlying infrastructure helping? Is that the digital one or is it a physical one? And the normative ideas. Are you about sharing? Are you about fulfillment of life, or is it about increased consumption? So thinking about the kind of processes that you are contributing to would really help. So that's really the end. And the last one is just an invitation for anyone to be part of this, and that we have tools available for you to sort of sort things out. And the last one is just the picture of Mission Innovation, the platform that I'm working with. So if you have something also, we're more than willing, and we collaborate with Climate-KIC also and see how can we assess those solutions, how can we bring together a community also. Because the last thing that I want to say is that you are really the future of the climate discussion. For the last 30 years, we focus on the big polluters and how they can reduce. That is not enough. We need, over the next 2-3 years, to shift the focus so that 80-90% of the focus is on entrepreneurs and the new solutions and less on the old ones. Compare with now, when we spend 90% of the old solutions and maybe best cases 10% on entrepreneurs. So you really have the future for you also, and I really thank you for having me here, and look forward to collaborate with all of you.
That's great, Dennis. Thank you so much for that that insightful presentation and giving us a few new ways of looking at things. People in the audience were saying, like people like Minu were saying, that they really appreciate this idea of asking deep questions and rethinking what a good life is. You've probably asked a lot of those questions, thought a lot about what a good life could be. What kind of opportunities do you see for entrepreneurs who currently do not have a business idea yet, but where they could really make a difference? Like, what do you see as sort of as business areas or idea areas where they should think about developing ideas to really have an impact? And you can maybe have a few percentage for the best ideas. So.
Yeah, well, I think the exciting things right now is just to take a step back and realize basically everything. If you're an educator, how do you educate in the 21st century? If you're a marketing person, and I think the enabling side, because I think it's quite clear that smart technology solutions, plant-based food or renewable energy, that's part of that. But I think what is really missing to a large extent is the enabling parts. You as an economist, you as a lawyer, you as a marketing person, though you really shape what people think is attractive. So if you can come up with a new way to measure, to understand how we shape our ideas, because I think the lower part of Kirsten's image on the system transformation, that is really our ideas of the future. What is successes? Think a little bit on how you can engage in that and shape that through everything from marketing to education to legal systems. That's really where we need much more innovation, because that's where the system change instead of just putting in single solutions. So that would be my suggestion. But really, just please take a step back and just enjoy the fact that you are one of the few generations that gets to build a society. For the last 150 years, we improved on the industrial society. Now we're building something new. So every one of us should be an entrepreneur. Few of us would like to be that. But as long as you have that and think about how you're shaping the society, you're part of this game. And don't think about it as too sophisticated also. Try to do something, iterate, instead of sitting back home and just thinking. And that's where Climate-KIC is so important also, is throw it out, join a competition, throw these things out. You will realize that there's actually quite few people pushing these ideas. There are too many people with sort of good intentions that don't take the step to actually translate that into action. And that's what we need. And that's where this event is so important. And I'm so happy that, we are still here, hundreds of people that really could be part of that transition community.
Thank you, Dennis. I believe it was Thomas Edison who said, "A vision without action is just hallucination." And I think that's something that we might take to heart. Thank you so much for your contribution. We're moving on to the third and final part of our Inspire section, which is a presentation from Olga, one of the alumni from our startup programs, who's actually sitting about 150 kilometers from where I am, though we haven't met yet. Olga, happily handing over to you to tell us a bit about Agra Sustain and your journey.
Sure, thank you. I don't know, can you share my screen, please? Perfect, thank you. Oh. Can you see it? I hope so. So hello everyone. As it was mentioned before, I'm not anymore sure which part of the day or night you have at this stage. But in any case, I would like to present you Agra Sustain, which is a young company. We are located in Switzerland and we were incorporated in May 2018. And actually, I think already from 2019, we were in constant touch with Climate-KIC. We got a number of supports from them and also a number of great ideas that actually helped us significantly to improve our offering. So just a few words about Agra Sustain. We were talking a lot about climate change, but I think the problem is a bit more general, and it's not only about climate, it's also about sustainable foods and how we can integrate all the solutions together in order to provide the best impact for all of us. So in terms of Agra Sustain, the vision was actually coming, I think, from my childhood, where I was working a lot in the garden together with my grandparents. And when you see how much effort it takes for people to grow a little plant of potato or a cherry tree, it's becoming impressive. And at the same time, when you look at the alternative which we have these days on the market, you mainly see very efficient solutions, but unfortunately most of them are of the synthetic origin and not a lot of alternatives coming from the biological background. And I guess that's exactly why during my PhD, I tried to address this issue, and at the end of the day, we were able to come up with Agra Sustain that actually develop sustainable solutions, mainly of natural or biological origin, to protect the fruits in the field and also in the post-harvest. Now, all of you heard about food waste, and it's one of the core issues. But even this issue can be broken on a lot of parts, starting with the weight loss reduction of crops. For example, when we are transporting bananas from Latin America to Europe, it's taking on average 21 to 25 days. And if you have the banana in a container, of course, they start to lose significant amount of water. And at the end of the day, they become a bit shrink and the quality of the fruit is decreasing a lot. The other issue is fungal infection. I guess each of you is familiar with that, especially when we think about berries. You buy beautiful strawberry or blueberry, and a few days after, it's like all grayish, bluish. And this is not what we like to see. And the other problem is ripening, which at the end of the day leads to the non-consumable crops. Ripening is something that a lot of companies these days also trying to address. And the reason for it is basically to extend the shelf life of crops. And so we have a bit more time to consume the crops and reduce the food waste on its own. So in Agra Sustain, the goal...
Olga, can I briefly interrupt you? We're seeing just the PowerPoint screen and not the presentation mode. So maybe if you just go out of presentation mode and into the PowerPoint main screen, and just show it from there. I think you're on slide 4 now. Is that true?
Like that? Can you see?
Yeah, like that it works. Yes. You
Okay.
can continue from here. Sorry.
Like this, you can see it better?
Yeah, just keep going like this from here. That's fine. Sorry for
Okay.
that.
You should have told me a bit before.
I know. Sorry.
No worries. So talking about Agra Sustain, I mean, our goal is, of course, to reduce the food waste. And in order to do so, we are doing a pipeline of solutions. So actually, in March, we are launching our first commercial product, which is going to be natural coating. So it's a transparent, invisible barriers that you do not also smell and you do not feel when you're eating it, which you can spray or buff on the top of the crop, and it protects the crop from losing the water and also extends the ripening time of the fruit, so extending its shelf life. How it works? It helps the fruit to stay in a dormant stage a bit longer. So it's a bit like us. We all know if you do not sleep enough, usually if you do not look so fresh. And it's the same for fruit. If we help it to sleep a bit more, it's actually extending its shelf life. And what is also important, on the later stage, we would like to integrate fully organic and biological coating for European as well as the other markets as of 2024. And the final goal of Agra Sustain is to combine 2-in-1 solution. On one side, solutions that will help to extend the shelf life of crop, and on another side, solutions that will kill the fungi or mold which are impacting our crops. So now, if you talk about coating, which is just about to be on the market. It's natural, and this is the core thing about this. It's leaving no residues, because I think most of us are concerned these days, what are we eating, with what our food is being sprayed, for example. And in this case, you do not need to worry. The other important point of our solution that it provides a very broad coverage. It does not only work on 1 or 2 types of crops, but it works on over 15 types of fruits, vegetables, and also on cut flowers. And it provides high effective protection by reducing water loss and by extending the shelf life of a crop, as well as easy integration into supply chain. Previously, I was telling you that for some crops, we have to export it from Latin America, for example. And in this case, if you want to extend the quality of a crop, the best time for application would be, of course, the producer, let's say in Peru or Brazil. But if it's not the option, we can still do application a bit later in the process at the wholesalers who are suppliers to our retailers. And in this case, we can still provide a few more days extension of the shelf life to us as the end consumer. And what is the goal of all of this is also to reduce not only the cost of transportation, but also to make transportation more sustainable. Because these days, a lot of very fragile crops, like figs or asparagus, for example, usually being shipped by air. And of course, the price is quite high, as well as it's not very environmental friendly solution. Whereas by integrating our coating, we can much more promote the boat transportation over the air freight. And here's just an example how our coating works. So down you can see bananas. I like to show bananas because here we're all familiar how the ripening looks. Down is 2 bananas which are fully ripened, and on the top you can see the same stage of bananas which are coming from the same supplier, but they're still yellow and nice. And this is actually exactly what our coating does. And just in a summary, the core goal of Agra Sustain by providing this solution is, of course, to extend the shelf life and thus promote also more sustainable ways of transportation for our clients, such as producers or wholesalers, provide an protection of the fruit and let it still possibility to get ripened during the long transportation or storage time. And this is not everyone from our competitive side who can offer this solution. And more importantly, it's one solution for a number of crops, as well as reduction of plastic and maintenance of high food quality. So thank you very much for your attention. Maybe we should stop sharing the screen.
Thank you so much for your input, Olga. Wonderful to see such a concrete solution and the work that you're doing. We have a lot of starting entrepreneurs in the audience. Can you give maybe 1 or 2 or 3 pieces of advice you would give them from your journey of starting out and also going from research to become an entrepreneur?
I think the core, I mean, usually people like to say, if you have an idea, you should go for it. But I like to add here that it's not only about our idea, it's also about what the market needs. So sometimes when you have a very cool idea, I would really recommend you to go out with it and to talk to the potential clients of yours. And this can, on one side, give you additional hints, what can be optimized and what can help you. And on another side, it might even maybe take you a bit out of your comfort zone, but give you additional hint to come up with some new solutions that might be even better than your first idea.
Is there an example where you, from Agra Sustain, where you changed because of those customer conversations?
I mean, we added the coating line, for example, because of our clients. Because when we started, we were working only on fungicides. So this is a new product that we are planning to integrate later on. And as you could see, it takes quite a lot of time to get an approval for certification and everything. And in parallel, we were still talking to our clients, and some of them said, do you have something for freshness extension? And we said, no, but we can work on that. So this is exactly how it all started.
That's great. And I think also when you have the idea and you're in an early stage, you can also do that part-time, right? You can dedicate a bit of time to start talking to people and then slowly get more and more in the operational mode. Thank you. Yeah, please.
We apply for a number of grants in the beginning because it's usually these grants and accelerating programs that they can put you in touch on one side with right people from investment point of view, but on another side, it's also a lot of feedback in terms of business development, because these days we know that most of the innovation is still coming from the research groups, and it's very important at the early stage to start already understanding your market.
Great. Thank you so much for your input, Olga. It's wonderful to have you as part of the ClimateKIC family. Good luck with Agra Sustain, and I'm sure we'll see you around.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you. Okay, so we're now doing one of our second goals, which is networking. For that, you will have to become active. So compare it to a normal event that you're attending, where you actually have to move to a different room to start networking. Well, here in Hopin, we have the feature and networking. So if you see on the left of your screen at the bottom, you see these little hands together, and that's the networking section, where if you click there, you will very soon be automatically joined by another person who's in the room for a 2.5-minute conversation where you just get to know each other. And if you're looking for some guiding questions, you could use these. What brings you to this climate entrepreneurship event? Why are you passionate about climate change? And maybe introduce yourselves. We're going to do about 2 rounds, and you will receive a notification when we're coming back for the next bit of our program, which is going to be more around action. So with that, I would say, please move to the networking event, join there, and I will see you in 5-ish minutes here again. So hello, everybody. We're back now from the networking. I realized that was fairly short, but that is the idea of the speed networking. What we'll make sure is at the end of the event that we'll keep the networking area open for a bit. So if some of you still want to network, you can. Just to know if you have any experiences now with networking, if you like that, or maybe if you did not have the time to exchange contact details with each other, please use the chat during the event, where you can then maybe leave your contact details or share your LinkedIn. So if people want to connect with you, then we use that opportunity, as Connect was one of the goals. Maybe Elizabeth, can you share my screen as well? So what we'll do now for the next session is we'll have a very brief overview of the strategic programs and the topic behind it, which are the topics of the breakout sessions that will happen afterwards. So you'll just have 5 to 10 minutes now of listening, and then you get the opportunity to discuss these actual programs and potentially opportunities for you. So we're first going to hear briefly from Climathon, where unfortunately the live session, breakout session, had to be cancelled because COVID also hit our team. The organizer from Climathon is unfortunately out sick with COVID. So I'll just briefly say something about that, but we'll move on. Then we'll do ClimateLaunchpad, our idea competition. We'll do ClimAccelerator to boost startup ideas. We'll talk about ClimateKIC as strategic investor and this investment space in climate. And then finally, we have a project around the EIC that you'll hear from. So very briefly, what are our strategic programs, so you know which room to go to afterwards? So what is Climathon? Climathon is a city-based programs to empower local communities to take action in their city. So we work together with local partners in over 100 cities around the world. We're saying we want to work with the government, with stakeholders, with companies to first organize get-together meetings. And then there is this big Ideathon, which is a hackathon over a long weekend, where all these people are made up, talking to the government to develop ideas on how they can improve their city further. And then afterwards, there's often a support program to make sure that those ideas actually happen. And if you want to get involved with Climathon, there are basically 3 opportunities. So citizens, you can join a Climathon in your region. As said, we have over 100 around the world. Where you can go through. You can find that on the link and on the map. If you are an organizer or just an individual, say, I would like to bring Climathon to my city or my village or my town, because it also needs to get up to speed with the fight against climate change, you can join as an organizer. And then also we will partner with a number of ecosystem actors, such as the Impact Hub Network, who say we're going to bring this to multiple locations. So please get in touch. Climathon is a really good way to really create change on a local level in your city and idea generation. That's the first program. For the second program, the ClimateLaunchpad, I believe we're going to David Watt or Chris. I don't know, Elisabetta. I think I can share the slides, but you can let them speak.
He should be Chris, but we're missing him.
Okay. Well, then
It's coming.
let's make.
I'll let
Okay.
him speak.
Perfect. Hi, Chris. The floor is yours.
Great. Sorry, I'm only just back on. So, but can you hear me? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. I missed the launch in. Yeah. So I'm just going to chat quickly about the ClimateLaunchpad program, which hopefully many of you in the audience already know about. But yeah, it's a global green business ideas competition established in 2014. So been running now for a long time and sort of grows year on year. What we aim to do is to find the best climate positive solutions and support them with intensive training to turn their ideas into a feasible business. Really what we're talking about in the presentation that Olga made earlier is really if you have that idea and you're early stage and you want to test it against the market, refine that business model, we give the business fundamentals alongside a sort of extensive process over the course of 6 or 7 months. The competition is organized at the country level, and what we see is last year we were in 55 countries, and really in the kind of core of the ClimateLaunchpad approach is this sort of decentralized approach where national leads take the program and run it in their own context. And just to say that, you know, back a bit actually, Niels, I just want to focus on the previous one for a bit longer, and just to say, I think we've as I said before, we've really kind of helped to support entrepreneurs develop their ideas and launch their companies over a long period of time and accelerated thousands of ideas over the previous. Yeah, just to say what attracts people to our program, it's the access to global networks, the deep technical expertise we can offer, the ease to run. So for new partners, the ability to add this within to your existing programs and complement it. It's that deep focus on climate impact. So really building on Dennis and Kirsten's talk, how do we identify the most transformative ideas? And it's sort of the overall general nature of it, so that we really cast the net wide. I'm rushing through a little bit to catch up on time. And so just to say quickly, this is the timeline. It runs over the course of a year. Typically, we start receiving applications from March and run through to June, and then the intensive training begins. It typically kicks off with boot camps by experienced expert trainers, international trainers, moving on to in-country coaching, and then national finals, regional finals, and then the global grand final, where you pitch your ideas against others and help refine your idea. So that's the timeline here. And then the last slide is really how do you get involved? As an entrepreneur, we're really looking for people. And as I said, it can be just at the idea stage, but we're looking for you to submit your ideas. The competition is run on country by country basis. So if your country doesn't have a national host, we'd encourage you to ask them to host it or to apply. And for national leads, which is what we call the partners in each country, we're looking for for you to register your interest about now. If you're a new partner and would like to be part of the partnership, then go to the ClimateLaunchpad website and register your interest. For new partners in countries that we don't have, you'd be expected to cover the running costs of that, and also most likely the cost of the digital bootcamp trainer, but it's possible that we'd have central funding to cover that. So the best thing to do is to register your interest via the CLP site, which I think is in the chat there now. Right, back over to you, Niels. I think that's a very quick run through of the ClimateLaunchpad.
Thank you so much. And if people have more detailed questions for you, they can join the session happening afterwards. So then we move on to our largest program, the ClimateAccelerator. And for that, I'm going to hand over to Christian.
Thanks, Niels and Elisabetta. Welcome, everyone. Good to see you all. A few familiar faces and a lot of interesting and new names coming up here. So with our ClimateAccelerator approach, I think similar to Climathon and ClimateLaunchpad, we're really trying to help startups. And in this case, we want to really help accelerate their growth, right? Startups all over the world who have a positive climate impact. How can we help them grow? How can we help them raise and look for diverse investment and financing options? And our approach is really to help organizers of such entrepreneurship programs to catalyze, to receive expertise, contents, mentors, and coaching from us and from our organization and our networks to really help their startups grow faster. I think. We've got diverse ClimateAccelerator programs. Some of them are EIT funded and are active across Europe. You can see them here on the map. Then we're growing also in diverse continents and countries around the world, where we have some of our main partners as Irish Aid, CDC Group, for example, funding some of these accelerators to happen, let's say in Africa. And we're growing really the community across Latin America and Asia as well. So we've got now more than 40 ClimateAccelerator partners around the world who hopefully will start their programs this year and will run faster. And I think this is really the idea. I mean, if you look at some of the success cases, we can see that at least 45 of these entrepreneurs have been featured in Forbes 30 under 30 in Europe, for example. And now it's really time to also get some of the entrepreneurs in Africa, Asia, and Latin America to also be featured, but also to be very successful in their national and international growth. And that's our mission, that's our purpose. If you want to get involved, if you're a startup, you can always find the list of climate accelerators on our website. Check them out. They're opening up in different moments. Apply to that call for startups. If you're a mentor, just contact us. We'll select you, we'll filter you, and you may become a mentor of any of these programs. If you're an organization working with entrepreneurs, contact us as well. I think we're having interviews where we'll design and then talk about how we can work together and how you can start doing such a climate accelerator program. And if you're, for example, an ecosystem actor, right? If you want to support such organizations, if you want to support such entrepreneurs, also feel free to reach out to us. We may work together, or you may start working together with some of our climate accelerator partners on the ground in diverse countries. And last but not least, if you're an investor, I think David Houghton will talk right now about the investor world and how we work closely together with investors to really connect startups who are looking for investments with that world. And that's already. Find more information on our website. Stay tuned. Feel free to touch base with us and join the breakout session in just a bit.
Thanks so much, Kirsten, for that brief overview of the program. And I think it's important to say for all of these three programs that they work a little bit like TED and TEDx. So everybody knows TED sort of as a central program, and through TEDx, you can bring these programs to your region or through your context. And it's the same with Climathon, with ClimateLaunchpad, and with ClimateAccelerator. You can bring that to your region if you're interested. Just get in touch. We have two more sessions coming up. So first, we're going to talk about Climate-KIC as strategic investor, and then I'm going to hand over to David.
Thanks, Niels. Hi, everyone. My name's David. I work in the Climate-KIC investment team. Just very quickly before we talk about our investor marketplace, Climate-KIC is in quite an exciting transition period. We are making a move into early stage venture capital investment. So we are transitioning to being a strategic investor with blended finance solutions across grant funding and equity funding now. So really exciting time. We have, as you've seen before, our ClimateAccelerator programs with deal flow from tens and tens of nations around the world, and we now support well over 250 startups each year. We'll be investing in a few of those, but obviously we have a ton of further deal flow to share with investors within our network. To give you a bit of an idea, our startups have raised well over 2 billion euros in follow-on funding, and we have awesome companies in there like Hexify, New Wardrobe, Insects in Paris, the largest grower of black soldier flies in the world. We have Climeworks, one of the largest carbon removal companies in the world, who are selling carbon offsets to large technology companies. And we have our climate marketplace, where we will be sharing deal flow with all of our investors. So if you're keen to get involved, Niels, I think on the next slide there's a link to sign up. So we'll share this with everyone after the show. And what we'll do is we'll automatically matchmake you with relevant deal flow that we're made aware of through our startup portfolio. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much, David. And again, that's a great overview of the activities, and you'll be in a breakout session as well for people who want to dig deeper into investment, and not just what Climate-KIC does, but also some of the trends. And I believe you have a guest to talk about this as well. The final presentation, and I believe Parisa is with us to tell us something about the collaboration that we have with EIC as one of the largest new players in the area of supporting startups in Europe. And we have a pilot program together with them. Parisa.
Thank you very much, Niels. Hello, everyone. I'm Parisa, also part of Entrepreneurship team at Climate-KIC. And in this short time, I would like to talk a little bit about the new program that we are starting in collaboration with EIC, European Innovation Council. As Neil said, it's the newest innovation body of EU. And within this collaboration, we are aiming to find a synergy between these two organizations to support better our startups and also EIC startups and connect these two startup communities together. We have within this pilot program, which started around 6 months ago, and it's going to continue also until end of this year. We are going to have, we are having already 3 programs. Each of these programs are targeting different group of startups in different stages, and we are hoping to offer services from both organizations to these communities. So in a breakout session, I will go more into details of each of these programs, but very briefly, we have one program for, we have 2 programs for EIC startups. One of them is for more mature startups or beneficiaries that we are helping them to measure their climate impact. And another one is more targeting early stages innovations and helping them to bring them to the market. And the third pillar is the other way around, is aiming to help the startups which has been supported by Climate-KIC previously in ClimAccelerator, for example, as Kirsten was explaining, and give them better and faster access to EIC fund, which is one of the biggest public funds available in Europe. So if you're interested to know more about the details of these 3 programs, you can join us in the breakout session. Thank you, Niels.
Thanks so much, Parisa. So with that, we're now going to go to the networking sessions. So if you go to in Hopin on the left of your screen, you see sessions where there's also this red button saying now. We will have 4 sessions happening there. One about ClimateLaunchpad, again, idea competition around the globe. We will have one on the ClimateAccelerator, supporting startups, the way it works. We have one around investment with a guest, and as Parisa just said, one on the EIC. So with that, we're taking now 25 minutes for the breakout rooms, and then we will come back here to the main stage for the closing of this New Year's events, which will be until 12 at 12:55. We'll come back for the closing here. So 25 minutes now in the breakout rooms. You can choose which one you want to go to, and you can also hop around freely. So it should be self-explanatory by clicking on sessions, joining one, and then moving from one to the other. If you have any questions, please use the chat function, and one of our team will be sure to help you. Wishing you great discussions in the breakout rooms. So it's nearly 1 o'clock Central European time, so about time to wrap up this event. I know it's always tricky to come back to the main stage after you've been engaged in a deep discussion in the breakout rooms, but we still would like to take the opportunity to just very briefly, bring you all back and wrap everything up. So I think if there's one thing that we learned from this event, then it's really that we cannot solve the exponential problems with linear mindset. We firsthand experienced what an exponential problem is through COVID, right? First, it was in a small province in China, and then suddenly it was in 1 or 2 places in Europe, and then it was everywhere. And that's exponential problems. And that is exactly what climate change is going to do to us as well. So we do need exponential mindset and exponential tools and exponential support to tackle that problem at a systemic level. And we just, in closing, wanted to share the opportunities to get involved for individuals. So again, these are our programs. So whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're an individual with an idea, whether you're part of an entrepreneurship organization, there are all these opportunities to get involved with our programs. You can also all find them on our websites to get more input. And these are the kind of places where you get training in systems thinking and exponential thinking, where you find a community, where you find support. And so we would love to hear from you. Then as well, of course, there are many opportunities for partners, so for organizations, for sponsors, for donors. We're running a number of programs. Please get in touch with one of us, and we can do amazing things together through the community of organizers that we have around the world. I think the closing word from from our side is that you probably know this old Chinese prophet, right? The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. And I think that's exactly where we are with climate change. The best time to tackle this was maybe 150 years ago when we designed the Industrial Revolution. We had many opportunities since, but the absolute best opportunity to do that is actually today. So with that, I think you can applaud yourself for showing up today, for coming, for sharing your opportunities and your stories. We're very much looking forward to help make 2022 the year in which we change the narrative on climate change, and hopefully we'll do that together. We will try to leave the networking space open for a little bit longer in the breakout sessions, so you can continue discussing there, those of you who still want to, but we're closing the formal part of the event. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you, Elisabetta, for hosting. Thanks to all the speakers, and looking forward to create an impact together. Have a great time, everybody. Thank you so much.